Hello, I'm going to tell you a story today, and it's a special story because no one has ever heard it before. You're the first. It's special for another reason. It's also a true story. So listen well and you might just learn something. It's called The King of Spring. A long time ago, when the world was still wild, before man set stone into branches and felled the great forests, the earth was ruled by a powerful witch with a heart of ice. She covered the land in winter frost. Her skin was white and her hair was black, and she lived invisible amongst the birch trees. She spun thick clouds to block out the sun, laughing at her ancient enemy. And as she laughed, great storms and gales howled around her. But there came a time, who knows how many thousands of years later, when she began to feel lonely. And she wrapped her arms around herself, saying, "If only I had some children to hold to myself and keep me warm through the winter nights." As she said these words, so it was. In her arms she saw 3 little lights, small and faint and gently glowing. And at the sight her heart began to warm, and as it warmed she saw little faces yawning and winking within the lights. "I know what I will do," said the Witch of Winter. "I will make you each a hat to warm your bald heads and your little ears." For the first she made a hat of deepest orange and knitted it into tufts on either side. The moment she placed it on the first child's head, the forest was awash with russet browns, cider yellows and ruby reds dancing like fire. The branches groaned with nuts and berries, and mushrooms peeped from the forest floor and the trunks of trees. And the Winter Witch understood that her child was Autumn. The baby yawned, and taking its first lungful of the wonderful new scent, earthy and spiced, he opened his eyes and sprang from his mother's arms with a great tail of flame. The flame transformed into a huge bushy tail, and darting up a tree, the first baby wriggled his orange tufts and scampered away into the woods. And so the squirrel became the Prince of Autumn. Well, that was certainly an interesting sight, thought the Winter Witch, and with the 2 remaining lights nuzzling her armpits, she sat at the foot of a tree and began the second hat. This hat was pointed and striped, yellow and black, yellow and black, yellow and black. And to finish, she plucked a thorn from the nearest branch and sewed the point to the hat. From the moment she placed it on the second child's head, the air fell still and warm, heady with perfume. The reds and browns turned to ripe emerald greens. Giant leaves, lush and dripping among drifts of fragrant flowers. The world hummed and shimmered under cloudless blue skies, and as a ray of sunlight fell across the baby's face, she opened up her tiny wings and buzzed away into the meadows to sip sugar from the flowers. And as she did this, the sun rose high in the sky and proclaimed her the Queen of Summer. The Winter Witch was quite disarmed to see how powerful her children were, and even forgave the sun his impertinence. She looked down and saw her last baby nuzzling into the crook of her arm, snoring gently glowing softly. "I am afraid those two have stolen the show, my dear. With all that drama, there's nothing left for you." She held him close and felt his feeble warmth against her cold heart. Working with the magic she had left, she fashioned him a simple grey cap with a soft white pom-pom perched at its tip. The baby shivered, cuddled in tighter, and wrinkling its nose, achoo, gave a tiny sneeze. Now, with all the flowers and fruits and nuts and berries around, the forest was no longer quiet and still. It was full of all manner of animals, from the tiniest beetle to the mighty bear, and they were all making so much noise, scuttling and flapping and snarling and snuffling, that the third baby could not sleep a wink. He peered out over his mother's arms and looked out at the forest and the world beyond, so big and tall and wide. And the more he looked at the bigness of it all, the more he took it into his head that he would like to be the biggest and bravest thing of all, if only he put his mind to it. So he pushed with all his might, sprouting arms and legs, and leapt down onto the forest floor. "This is easy," he thought, and he set off into the woods, his arms out wide, stomping and stretching and feeling himself getting bigger and stronger all the time. The Winter Witch thought it a very funny sight, but she held her tongue, watching with interest to see what he would make of himself. Off the third child stomped, deeper and deeper into the darkening wood. Suddenly he caught the smell of something dangerous. His nose twitched this way and that, and he caught the smell again. A twig snapped in the distance, and the third child listened, and as he listened for another sound, his ears stretched outwards longer and longer in search of a sound, and his black eyes widened, glinting like shining marbles. Puffing his chest up as big as he could, he shouted into the darkness of the forest, "Show yourself, coward! I am the king of this world, more powerful than an autumn prince, more powerful than the queen of summer, and 10 times more powerful than my mother, the witch of winter." Suddenly, 2 green eyes shining from the darkness, and before he had time to puff himself up again, an enormous wolf bounded from the shadows, letting out a terrifying howl that made the third child's blood run cold. He turned tail and ran, pounding at the ground with his back legs. Seeing no sign of his mother and no place to escape, he began to dig with all of his might. The white pom-pom toppled from the tip of his hat and rolled down his back, sticking to his bottom. This little quivering ball of white was the last thing the wolf saw before the third child disappeared into the earth. The woods fell silent. All the world was winter once more. The Winter Witch, who was watching all of this from a stand of white birches, giggled at the timid little animal she had made with the last of her magic. And then, so gently and quietly it was barely visible, the stark black branches began to prickle with delicate yellows and lime greens, soft and fresh and moist and full of promise. Primroses and daffodils peeked shyly from the glades. Tiny violets and pale white wood anemones shrank among the dapples. Even the sun seemed shy now. Its moment of brazenness had passed. And from this little hole, deep within the soil, the third child peeped, whiskers trembling, nose twitching. He inhaled the fresh, delicate scents, and out of the silence his long ears pricked up, and the birds began to sing, ever so quietly at first, and then rising together, soaring into a great chorus. And that, my dears, is how the humble rabbit was declared the King of Spring. The end. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.